You're ready.
Okay, it's not quite 2. Do you want me to go ahead and go?
If Patrick has no objections, I'm fine. I've only got a minute left. We might be off by a minute or 2.
Well, we've got a pretty good group here, so I think I can go ahead and get started. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Maryann Whitaker, and I'm an Adjunct Assistant Professor at John Tyler Community College and also a Certified National Trainer for the Center for Teacher Effectiveness. And so just so I know y'all are awake out there, everybody either hit your space bar and jump or hit your 1 and wave. Ooh. Uh-oh, not too many people awake out there. Okay, a few of you are. All right. Well, I'll just talk to the ones who are awake, and maybe we'll wake up the rest of you. I'm not sure. All right. All right. Actually, Christy, the last presenter, Christy Garrett, gave me a great segue into my presentation, because she talked about what the distance and broke that down by the letters, but her A was analyze your audience. And anyone who teaches writing knows that the first rule of writing is know your audience. And I'm going to unpack that just a little bit more with the idea of entering the matrix and teaching to multiple intelligences. All right, so how many of you out there consider yourselves to be lifelong learners? Raise your hand if you consider yourself to be a lifelong learner. Okay, actually you all are, or you wouldn't be here. Yeah, we're all lifelong learners, because if we're here, we're still trying to learn. We're still trying to hone our craft. We're still trying to get better at what we do. We're trying to add to our toolbox and be able to teach more effectively. Well, we talk a lot about lifelong learning, and of course that's something we want our students to aspire to. We hope that all of our students will become lifelong learners. But what's the best way to accomplish that, actually? We know that learning takes place outside the classroom for the most part. What we do in the classroom really only provides a framework for our students to teach them how to learn. But much of their learning is going to take place outside of our purview. They're going to learn in ways that we aren't even aware of. So we need to set up an operational framework for learning, but we have to serve a whole range of students. If all you do is stand up there and lecture, you're probably missing a tremendous amount of your students who are not auditory learners. They may be kinesthetic learners. They may be, tactile learners. There are just too many different learning styles to be able to only use one tool in our toolbox. And for myself, I don't consider myself to be a gifted lecturer. I actually don't like lecturing, and I figure it's boring for the most part. So if I'm bored, my students are bored, and I don't want my students to be bored, so I prefer to use other means. But the way that we can do that is by differentiating the material we present and differentiating the ways we solicit feedback. And I'm not just talking about feedback that says, oh, you're a terrific teacher. I'm talking about feedback that lets us know that our students are connecting with the material. And because they're going to connect in different ways, they're going to employ multiple intelligences. And even an individual learner doesn't learn everything in the same way. We have various ways of learning ourselves, and we're going to apply those various ways of learning to what we do. All right, so by applying those and addressing those different learning styles and modalities of learning, students connect with course material in a way that makes sense to them. All right, so we need to kind of identify, and one way we can do that is by doing what Christy suggested, and that is by analyzing your audience. yes, you're going to have to get to know your students, and you're going to have to understand the various learning styles. I realize that when we're changing students semester after semester, and we have only 14 or 15 weeks to be able to accomplish that, it's a big job. But we do need to do that. And there are ways to do that even when you don't know your students, even in the first week of classes, by utilizing discussion boards and whatnot. We can definitely identify various characteristics of our learners. All right, I started life as a high school history teacher. Then I jumped into banking, then back to K-5, then to real estate, then to higher education, both as a student and an instructor. So I've actually spent my entire life falling in love with teaching and learning over and over and over again. And I think that as educators, we do that. Every personality inventory I've ever taken has said teacher, teacher, teacher. I've tried to fight against that a few times, but now I've succumbed. I've given in. I'm a teacher. It's what I do. It's what I love, and it's what I'm suited for, I guess. So according to those personality inventories or interest inventories or whatever they are, I'm supposed to be doing this. So I think I'm in my niche. All right. So multiple intelligences. Anyone know who these guys are? Can anyone tell me who these guys are? No? Really? Who are these guys? No takers, huh? All right. Well, you may know. Okay, Tasha, Stephanie, I heard somebody speaking up.
This is Stephanie. I think on the left is the Welcome Back Carter group.
Uh-huh. Yes,
And
absolutely.
the right are the nerds. I can't remember what. I think it's the nerds.
Yeah, it's the nerds from Revenge of the Nerds. But actually, these two groups are my last two classes of the day in my very first teaching job. So I had back-to-back 5th and 6th period, the sweat hogs and the nerds. And obviously, I couldn't teach these guys in exactly the same way. I mean, the sweat hogs even called themselves the sweat hogs of Hilliard High School. So they definitely identified themselves this way, and they wanted me to kind of identify themselves this way. They made a point of telling me the first day that this is how they identified. So I knew immediately what I was up against with these guys. And then my 6th period class, which was my last class of the day, and obviously came right behind the sweat hogs, were honors students. I was teaching them the exact same class. It was American history, and the exact same material, exact same class, but obviously I had to find some way to teach them in a way that each group and the individuals in that group were going to be able to work with the material and engage with the material in the way that they learned the best. So without even knowing what I was doing really, I had to figure out how am I going to address these two different groups of students in a way that is meaningful to them? So what I was practicing and didn't even know it at the time, and of course being a brand new teacher, not really truly aware of all the nuances, I was using differentiated instruction. In other words, I was figuring out the optimal way to get the students engaged with the content. Obviously my sweat hogs, they, were pretty much your slacker students, the students that really truly didn't see the value in school, didn't want to be there, didn't care much about American history. I mean, American history is one of those subjects in high school that a lot of students don't like. So they didn't see the need for it. And because it was a rural farming community, they decided that they were just going to man the family farm, and they were actually not going to learn anything from this because it wasn't meaningful to them. It didn't mean anything to them. And I asked them, well, what are you going to do when the family farm is no longer around? And they couldn't even conceive of that idea, that their families, some of them had been on those farms for 5 generations, and they really, truly, they could not even conceive of, not working that family farm. Ironically, today, that little rural town is now a suburb, a bedroom community of a large metropolitan city, and those family farms are gone. So if those students didn't learn, then they probably, didn't have the tools in their toolbox once they went out of high school and had to move on to be able to do much of anything else. The honor students, obviously very motivated, wanted to engage with the material. I had absolutely no problem getting them to do the reading and to participate and do all of the things that you just adore your students for doing. But I had to figure out a way, even though I was brand new, and even though I was working with two separate groups of students, I had to figure out a way to be able to get both groups of students to engage with the same material. They all had to pass American history in their junior year, and that was part of the deal. So without even realizing it, I had stumbled on differentiated instruction. Now, part of my problem here stemmed from the fact that I was 22, but I didn't look any older than the students I was teaching. I actually was 22 and looked 16. In fact, I had taken one of my classes to an assembly one day, and on my way back to the classroom, I got stopped and asked for my hall pass. Obviously, the teacher that stopped me was suitably embarrassed when he realized that I was the teacher. But I had to struggle to get these students respect. They weren't going to automatically respect me. And as a matter of fact, the first day of my whole experience from the sweat hog class, I got a spit wad to the back of the head. And yeah, they did spit wads, which, I don't even know if students do spit wads anymore, but they actually shot a spit wad at me. So I knew that I was in for a giant challenge right up front, and that I was going to have to come up with some way to be credible to these students. And the only way I was going to be credible to these students was by enabling them or getting them to engage. So I got with the leader of the sweat hogs, sort of their version of Vinnie Barbarino, and I struck a deal with them. And I said, I'll tell you what, if you guys will lay off the spit wads and the smart remarks and the acting out for a month, just give me 1 month. And I'm going to come up with a way for you guys to actually enjoy American history and get engaged with it. And I said, if after a month I can't do that, then fire away, guys. So he said, okay. And we made a deal. And he was true to his side of the deal. He got his guys to back off and to pay attention in class and everything. And I went home that night thinking, oh my goodness, what have I done? Now I have to deliver. Now I don't have a choice. I've kind of, backed myself against the wall, so here I go. And I thought about, if I were a student who didn't like American history, didn't want to be in the class, what would I do? What would I want to see? How would I want to be engaged? So I came up with a series of activities that enabled the students to actually get up out of their seats, move around the room, engage with other students in the class, and really dive into the subject matter. And it seemed to work. Well, so without even realizing it, I had inadvertently stumbled on differentiated instruction. So research supports the idea that the more diverse opportunities students have to respond to instruction by reacting and interacting with the content, rather than just simply providing written responses on a quiz or verbal responses in the class, the better they achieve on standardized tests, the better they internalize the material, and the more self-motivated they are and the more participatory they are. So research supports the idea that the more diverse ways you give students to try and interact with that content, the more students you're going to reach, and the more the students are going to engage and internalize that material. So differentiated instruction can help you create those lifelong learners that we talk about. We give a lot of lip service to lifelong learners in education, but do we actually, are we actually able to deliver when the rubber meets the road? And we have to try to create those lifelong learners. Well, they're going to learn in spite of themselves. They're going to learn something, because they're going to learn by using the internet. They're going to learn by interacting with their friends on the street. They're going to learn by watching their parents. They're going to learn by interacting with you and the materials. So they're going to learn in spite of themselves, but are they learning the ways to learn that will keep them engaged and interested in learning for their entire lives? And that's really what we're trying to do here. Besides delivering content, we're trying to teach them how to be effective learners. And with all of the facilities they have at hand today with the internet and with Twitter and with Facebook, with Instagram, with all of the things that students use, they have a tremendous amount of material that they can go to. The problem is, do they know how to parse that material in order to be able to know what's valid, what isn't valid, what appears to be correct, or what appears to be just pure garbage? So what we're teaching them really is to learn how to discern between those things that are valuable to learn and those things that are just junk. So in order to facilitate lifelong learning, we have to know our material. Students know if you have no idea what you're talking about. They can tell that you don't have a clue. So we have to be content experts. And obviously, if you're teaching a subject and you've been teaching it a long time, you are a content expert. I no longer teach history. I now teach composition and argument. So I have to know what the facets of good writing and good argumentation look like, and I have to be able to communicate that effectively to my students. We have to know our students' strengths, learning styles, weaknesses, and generally within a week or so of starting a semester, I can pretty much identify who my social learners are, who the people who love to interact in a group, who my lone wolves are, the ones that sit in the back corner of the room and don't really participate much, don't really get into it. I know who my learners are who enjoy the hands-on stuff. So pretty much I can identify those learning styles and be able to try to accommodate as much of that as possible. Now, obviously, I can't know intimately every student in 14 or 15 weeks, just not possible. But I can definitely identify some characteristics of those students, and I can use a variety of methods, not only of delivering the content, but in allowing them to engage with the content. And I think that's probably the key here, is how do you allow your students to engage with the content? Do you give them choices? Do you enable them to see things in different ways from different perspectives? Do you allow them to interact with each other and be able to assimilate that content? So I think it's really important that we look at all of these, methods of being able to reach those students and learn their strengths and weaknesses. We need to be responsible risk takers. And by that, I don't mean go jump off a cliff. That isn't exactly what we need to do. I have a friend who every year takes his students on a rock climbing adventure at the beginning of the year. He's actually a K-12 teacher, and every year he invites his students to go rock climbing, and of course he gets all of the requisite permissions and whatnot. But he does trust building exercises by making his students go down a zip line. And frankly, that would terrify me. But his students actually learn that he's a real person who is willing to take real risks in order to engage with his students. We have to be reflective practitioners. If you're not willing to take a look at your teaching occasionally and decide what's effective and what's not, then you're probably not going to be willing to improve your teaching, or you're probably not going to be willing to change the style of some of the things you do. But using differentiation and creating lifelong learners takes reflection. We have to be willing to look at what we teach, look at how we teach it. I've taught the same argument course for many years, for over 10 years, and I don't think I've ever taught it exactly the same way twice. Using student feedback, looking at what works and what doesn't work in the classroom, looking at what, the things that I've done that appear to be effective. I changed that course semester to semester because it's a way that I can keep improving. We need to allow students time to reflect on their own learning. In fact, I require that. I require my students to write reflective essays. I require my students to use, thank you, Karen. I require my students to use the discussion board to be reflective, to reflect on their learning. I require them to reflect, in a final analysis of the assignment. And also at the end of the semester, I require them to reflect on the entire experience, the entire semester, everything that they've done for the semester. What did they learn? What did they want to learn but didn't? How do they think they could improve their own learning? And moreover, how can I improve what I'm teaching them and how I'm teaching them? And also, we have to allow students to construct their own learning. I know that this sounds a lot like, it's too much, we're losing control of the classroom, and there's too many uncertainties here. Well, obviously, you have to set parameters, and obviously, it's within some guidelines that you're willing to employ in order for your students to construct their learning. For instance, when I teach my argument class, I really want my students to engage with technology. I put a lot of technology into my classes, even my face-to-face classes. I'm not just talking teaching online. I'm teaching face-to-face too. And, so I require my students to engage with the technology. I don't take paper papers. I haven't taken paper papers for years. If a student handed me a written paper, I wouldn't even know what to do with it anymore. So they're required to use the learning management system. They're required to use Google Docs. They're required to use all sorts of other, technology and do things in a way that they can construct their learning through that technology. So their final assignment in the class is to come up with an argument using a medium of their choice to show me what they've learned about the content and to argue for their point of view on that content. And I generally use the Constitution as a framework for that, just because it's always in the news. They can always find current articles, and it's something that affects them every day. And most of them didn't get this in high school. They didn't learn it in high school. And they have to actually go back. They have to learn the history of it. They have to learn about the Constitutional Convention and do a project on that. They have to bring it forward into the 21st century. They can write letters to congressmen. They can make films. I had one student who designed an app for the iPhone because she felt like students needed to have this information at their fingertips. So her final project was to design a constitutional app for the iPhone, and it was, frankly, pretty amazing. So if you allow students to construct their own learning, not only will they be able to learn in the way that they learn best, they'll also be very creative in the way that they show you how they've engaged with the content and what they know. All right, so what are the core beliefs of differentiated instruction? And the core beliefs are things that we really need to be able to agree on as educators. Can we agree that all students are different? That if you have 30 students in a class, you're going to have 30 personalities, 30 learning styles, 30 different ways of engaging with the material. You can't do a one-size-fits-all approach because all of your students are different. Can we agree that all teachers are different? We don't all teach the same way. I can teach the exact same content as the instructor in the next classroom, and I guarantee you I'm not going to deliver it or engage with it or, work with it in exactly the same way, even though it's the exact same content. So teachers are different too. We bring ourselves into the classroom. We bring our personalities into the classroom. One of the reasons I use the Constitution is because I'm a politics junkie, and I make that really clear up front that I have loved politics and political writing and that kind of stuff since I was a teenager. Since I was about 14 years old, when everybody used to read physical newspapers, I would read the newspaper cover to cover every day. And so I just tell the students, look, part of me is that I'm a politics junkie. So you're going to have to deal with the junkie side of me here, because I love politics, and the Constitution it's a driver here. So it provides just a tremendously good framework to be able to show them how my love of politics intertwines with what I'm teaching them, with the material and the content that I'm trying to deliver here, which actually is teaching them how to write a good argument. So they learn all of this content about the Constitution, and they learn what it says, and they learn how it came about, and they learn what it does. But moreover, they learn how to argue their own point of view on First Amendment issues, Second Amendment issues, Fourth Amendment issues, 10th Amendment issues. So, students will grab on to various pieces of the Constitution because it's more meaningful to them. I could probably do an entire semester just on the First Amendment alone, but students gravitate to different pieces of it. So I let them sort of go to town with the pieces that really make sense to them. Different curricula used in different ways in different classrooms. And that goes back to all teachers are different. We use the material differently. We teach the material differently. We use that curriculum differently. Can we agree that we also should teach to a variety of receptive and learning styles? And I think I've already touched on this, is that we can't just stand up there and be a sage on the stage, talking head, and expect all of our students to engage with the material. They're probably not going to. I don't like to be lectured to. And I probably don't learn best that way. I like to dig in and get my hands into the material. And so if somebody's just going to stand up there, wah, 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 droning at me, I'm probably not going to learn it as effectively as if I can find the way that works best for me. Can we also agree that students need a reasonable amount of pressure for peak performance? If there's no sense of urgency, if there's no sense of the imperative here, why would students even care whether they learn it or not? There's no incentive. So students have to be put under a certain amount of pressure in order to be effective learners if we're going to teach them that particular content. I know for myself, I'm not terribly good at math. I can do it, but I'm not great at it. I don't hate math. I'm just not great at it. But I know for me that when I was taking math in high school and college, if I didn't have the test or the quiz to drive my learning, I wouldn't have sat there working a bunch of geometry problems until 11 o'clock at night until I understood my homework. I would have said, well, no one's going to test me on this. Why should I learn this? I'm not going to use geometry for the rest of my life because I'm not going to be a math teacher. And I'm certainly not going to be an engineer if I'm not good at math. So I needed that pressure in order to get me to engage with that material and to perform at my peak ability, which in math, probably, I was always happy with B's in math, even though I made A's in almost everything. I had to struggle to make an A in math. I made A's in math occasionally, but not my strong suit. So, and also, can we agree that as educators, we want to encourage lifelong learning and we want to create those lifelong learners? We are lifelong learners, as you told me in the beginning, so we want to encourage that in our students. Right, so for differentiated instruction, and this is actually the Time to Teach model, which is a trademarked program, and it's the one that I use. There are 5 pillars and a capstone of the Time to Teach differentiated instruction model. And the 5 pillars are promoting positive feelings. We need to be able to promote positivity in the classroom. Students have to come with a positive attitude. They have to be positive about their own abilities, about their own ways of learning. So if we encourage positive feelings about the learning and about the content in the classroom, our students are going to come in with a more positive attitude. They're going to leave with a more positive attitude. We need to promote attention and interest. And each one of these pillars has a variety of strategies underneath of it that can be used in order to accomplish the pillar. But we need to promote attention and interest. We have to use ways of delivering content and engaging content that promotes the student's attention, that gets the student's attention, and that holds the student's attention so that they can become interested in it. Sure, you may not have a whole classroom full of people who just adore American history or just love math, but there are certainly ways to get these students to engage with content. We have to promote connectedness and relevance. If students don't see this learning as relevant to them, then they're going to dismiss it. Just like my sweat hog said, why do I need American history? I'm just going to go man the family farm. So I had to show them how that was relevant to them, why it was relevant to them. So, part of what they had to do was to research the history of their family farm. I said, okay, if you want to know history, one way to know it is know your own history. So one of the methods that I used to get my sweat hogs to care about history was to have them research their own history and to know the history of their family and their family farm. And so then history became a little more relevant to them because, they would find out what was going on during the time when their great-grandfather and great-grandmother were farming that land. What were the social conditions? What was the political climate like? What were living conditions like? And strictly by just researching their own family, they inadvertently learned some American history. So, students have to see things. I mean, we have to see things as relevant. I generally don't tend to learn things well that I don't see as relevant to my own, personal interests or needs. And we have to promote self-efficacy. The students have to believe that they can do this. If I had not believed that I could pass that math test or that math quiz, I probably wouldn't have. I would have given up and said, you know what? I'm just not good at this, so as long as I pass the class, I'm good. But I wanted to feel like I was effective in that class. I wanted to feel like I had some sort of personal stake here. And so, I had to be effective in my learning. But then, you've got your motivators, or you've got your students who are self-motivated, and you got your students who aren't. And you're going to have to figure out the differences. Is it work? You betcha. But it's worth the work. And then the last pillar is sharing best practices. And that's something that we all need to be better at. And Christy also touched on that in her presentation. In being able to network. Her N was network with other faculty members, and it's not something that we're all super effective at. A lot of us like the idea of being martyrs. Unfortunately, educators tend to be martyrs, and we like to, beat our breast about the fact that, I have to toil alone, and it's such hard work, and I'm up until midnight, and blah, blah, blah. Well, you know what? You might be able to make your workload more efficient and make your teaching more efficient if you networked with other people who could share what works for them. And I think that's also something that school administration has to pay attention to. There has to be some sort of institution-wide mechanism for sharing those practices. Why am I going to reinvent the wheel, especially if I'm a new teacher coming in? Don't I want to be able to look at some of the successful teachers and what they do and be able to model after them? But I got to have a way to know what those teachers do. So if administration has a way for us to share best practices with one another, especially for people who are super effective in the classroom. And believe me, they look at student evaluations. They know what those student evaluations say. So they know who the teachers are who are most effective in the classroom. Why would you not want to share that? Why would you not want to be able to help your fellow educators become as effective as you are? So the capstone to all of that is that we're providing multiple opportunities for students to respond to instruction and to respond to the content and to respond to it in different ways. We can take the same content, have them respond to it in 3 different ways, and they're going to learn 3 different things. They're not all going to just, learn the same stuff. in the same way. All right, so a little bit of research. Every conference presentation should show you some research, right? So one of the things that I came across were these two articles that really talked about lifelong learning and how technology is going to be completely intertwined with that. And folks, we're in the 21st century. Technology is, that is the lifeblood of everything right now. We're in a technology age, and we're going to have to learn that technology is going to be the lifeblood of lifelong learning, because this is how our students come up. The students most of the students that are entering college now, straight out of high school, they've never known anything but technology. Their whole lives, they have had computers. Their whole lives, they have been able to record television shows. Their whole lives, there have been cell phones. These students have never not known technology. They're not like those of us who grew up in the dark ages when we had rotary dial telephones. And, there was no such thing as the internet. So these students are technology, but one of the things that I have found with students today is that they really want to keep their social media separate from their learning media. They actually don't want to use their social media heavily in learning. They'll use it for some things, but really they want their social media to be social, and they want their learning media to be learning. And so, all of the calls to, we must be able to use Twitter for our students. Well, no, actually only about 3% of our students have Twitter accounts and use it, unless we require them to have a Twitter account and we require tweeting. Now, I won't say that there aren't uses for it. I absolutely believe there are. But what can you communicate in 140 characters or less, other than you have a test tomorrow or you have a homework assignment due? Certainly we can use it in those ways. I've had classes that have developed Facebook pages. I've had classes that have developed wikis. And so, of course, there are many, many uses for these media, but I think we have to be very circumspect in how we employ social media in our teaching and with our students' learning. I don't want my students to believe that their learning experience is just completely for social purposes. So I just want to be very careful to make sure that I make that distinction between different types of media and what my students are using it for. Right. So my question to you is, if we're going to adapt to online instruction, how would you use these strategies online? How would you promote positive feelings? How would you promote attention and interest? How do you promote connectedness and relevance? How do you promote self-efficacy? And how do we share best practices? So really, that's my question to you. That's my discussion part, if you will. Trying to figure out how to. So how do we use these online? I mean, this program really, honestly, was designed to be effective for face-to-face instruction in the classroom. However, when I was getting involved with this, I thought, wow, there are a lot of principles here we actually could use in online instruction. So I want to throw it out to the audience, and please feel free to speak up. If you want to go to the microphones so that you can be heard, so that your voice is amplified, that's great. If not, I'll try to, translate if I need to. But, I want to hear from you as to how you would effectively use these strategies online. Anybody? Is everybody awake? Have I lost you? Veronica.
Maryann, I'm gonna be just brief here. Just to one thing that jumped in my mind as you were talking is on the campus where I am now, we have a tool called Adobe Connect that will allow you to host synchronous sessions, whether that be for group work, or maybe you use that for virtual office hours, or maybe just exam study sessions. But that tool is available to incorporate some synchronous sessions with your class. And so in doing that, you can do all of those things that you have on your slide there. Students come to you with questions, and you provide feedback. You can encourage them in their work. Definitely the connectiveness and the relevance that you're talking about. And sometimes some learners just have to have that sense of physical one-on-one in your face attention, and holding synchronous sessions like that could be a great component of that.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, you can do that with, I did that once with a face-to-face classroom. We had a snow day, the second day of class, and I was teaching an evening class, and evening classes generally run 3 hours, so they're the equivalent of 2 or 3 regular class times, but the school ended up closing because we had snow, and so missing one evening class, that puts my students at a tremendous disadvantage. So I emailed all of my students and I said, you know what, we have Blackboard Collaborate and we can get in there and we can use it. Let's meet online tonight. If you have, and obviously I couldn't hold them to that because the school was officially closed. I couldn't force them to do it. They had to come to it voluntarily, which was fine. But I emailed the students and said, hey, let's meet in Blackboard Collaborate tonight, and we'll go over the lesson that we would have covered today. That way we won't be so far behind when we come back. And almost every student in the class showed up for that Blackboard Collaborate session. They loved it. They loved it. They thought it was great. Even though we were a face-to-face class, they loved the idea of being able to get online and talk to one another and talk to me and be able to post things and use the chat box. And they just really got into that. So I think you're right, Veronica. I think using those synchronous methods really, really enhances the learning experience, even for face-to-face students. So yeah, great point. I love that. Anyone else? Karen, I know you use this stuff all the time. Do you have a comment?
So I was actually out looking for the research I needed to use during my presentation when you said every presentation should have research. No, I'm just kidding. Well, I was actually, but my next session is a little more touchy-feely, maybe. I don't know. Can you hear me? Oh, I could walk to the microphone.
Yeah.
There we
Yes.
go. So anyway,
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So, I actually use a fair amount of social media. So I suggest come and find out what you actually can accomplish with 140 characters. But the live things I use a lot. Adobe Connect's, kind of a little maybe better than a Collaborate in my mind because it's a commercial product. I think that businesses and things buy, but it's fabulous. I just spent all day yesterday in an online conference that ISTE put on for some grant folks that they're doing, and they had breakout rooms and a chance to network and those kinds of things. Here's what I'll say to you about those online sessions. I usually don't do them for any longer than an hour and a half with my classes. 2.5 and 3 hours with headphones on is a lot. I was exhausted yesterday after 5 or 6 hours. But the other piece too is take advantage of the built-in pieces of them. They have polling. They can raise their hands. They have an interactive whiteboard. Collaborate's got a whiteboard. It's a little clunky, but it's a way for people to sort of brainstorm ideas. You could put them in breakout rooms and then share what they've done in those breakout rooms. So really make it interactive. So it isn't just kind of them listening to you do an online lecture. And then I think you can, once you get to know the tools, you can make it a really interactive experience.
Yeah, great. That's a good point. Blackboard Collaborate just happened to be what was available to me, but there are a lot of really good online programs out there that, and I do think Adobe Connect is better. I have to agree with you there.
There's nothing wrong with Collaborate, though. I use it with one of my universities, but again, it's getting in there ahead of time and kind of exploring all the different things you can do with it, so that you help you help just make it a more interactive experience. So they're not like crocheting or something while they're attending class, I guess, because boy, now you really don't know what they're doing while they're in class.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And any kind of interactive program that we can use, I think it enhances the experience. If students can interact in real time, if they can, I totally agree with you, Veronica, that the synchronous interaction is very important. I'm really a proponent of that. This particular environment, this environment right here, the Buy Alive Engage. I love this environment, and I can see so many potential uses in the classroom, even for either online or face-to-face classes. I mean, I just see so much potential to use this environment to really enhance the learning experience for students and engage them. I would love to see more places be using virtual environments to accomplish their learning goals. Other comments? Maryann?
I'd like to kind of switch the subject and go back to learning styles, just because it's an interesting new twist. It's just like this morning I was watching the Today Show, and they told me I could eat eggs and shrimp and all of that because cholesterol from those things are not as important. Now it's like, the new thing seems to be learning styles are not important. And as a matter of fact, I think we had a presentation where someone talked about that a little bit. What's your personal take on that?
Okay, good question. My personal take is that you have to be able to accommodate all your learners in some way. Now, obviously, you're not going to reach 100%. There's just no way to do that. If you have these students as a lifelong thing, like if you started with students like Socrates did and they stayed with you for life and you knew them that well, you could obviously address each one of these individual things. But you do have to be aware that if you stand up there and lecture, you're probably only going to reach about 5% of your students, and the rest are going to turn off. They're going to be on their cell phones looking at their Facebook page or texting their friends, or, like I said, I'm sorry, but I find lecturing boring. I just don't like to be lectured to, and I don't consider myself to be a gifted lecturer. If I'm listening to a gifted lecturer, and I think there are very few, I'm fine with that, but I don't think most of us are gifted lecturers, and I honestly believe that just lecturing is a lazy way to teach. I think it's intellectually and physically lazy. It's easy. It's easy. It requires us to do no additional digging. And yeah, does it take more effort to be able to find out those learning styles and to be able to accommodate those? Absolutely. I feel like from my own personal experience, I try to deliver the content in a way that is meaningful to various constituencies in my classroom. So I do exactly that by arranging the content in a variety of ways so that, yeah, you might not love writing this paper, but boy, you're going to love doing this PowerPoint over here. So, if the assignment is construct a PowerPoint that has these things in it, you're going to love this. So, all right, you're not great at writing papers, and it's not your favorite thing, but this guy over here loves to write a paper. So by doing both things, I'm at least engaging, some sort of learning style on both sides. And I can tell you that the last semester I taught my constitutional argument class, I had, and I make my students work in teams because I'm sorry, folks, but unless you're the Unabomber or whoever, you don't get to work by yourself. You can't be a lone wolf. In today's environment, teamwork is important, and employers want to know that students can perform in a team setting. My own daughter said to me when she got out of college and into the workplace, she called me and she said, you know, Mom, she said, now that I'm out of school and I'm in the workplace and I'm part of a project team, she said, I really, truly understand why you guys make us do this. So you've got some students that don't enjoy group work. You might make a provision where, yes, they work in teams for part of the semester, work by themselves on certain other. I try to make a combination of those things, but I'm sorry, I do think learning styles matter. I know that there's this new thing that says, oh, you don't have to cater to learning styles. Well, baloney. Think of yourself as a learner. Do you learn the same way all the time? No. Do you have a certain way that you learn, that you seem to be able to internalize content and internalize processes and material better? Certainly you do. But if I only teach to that one learning style, I'm leaving out a whole bunch of students in my class who don't necessarily engage well with the material in that way. So my personal opinion is, yes, you do have to accommodate various learning styles, various learning modalities, and it's really not that hard to do. I know a lot of people don't want to have to, and yes, does it take some work? Yes, it takes some setup work. You have to monitor it. You have to be on top of it. You have to be able to, make changes quickly and be very agile with it. But in the long run, once you get used to doing it and once you get used to manipulating those assignments and whatnot, it actually becomes almost second nature. At this point, I don't think I could do it any other way.
I just think that's just an interesting new discussion. I'll tell you something that I find amusing in my household, looking at, and maybe we don't call it learning styles, but learning preferences.
Okay.
Whenever there is a problem that needs to be solved, my approach is go read everything I can find out about it, then go talk to somebody. Renee's approach is go talk to somebody, then go read stuff to see whether or not what they told you was correct. And we have these constant arguments because I'm saying, go look it up first. She's going, why should I when you can tell me the answer?
Well, and I mean, I think we all have that, Patrick and I the same way. We don't interact with content. We don't interact with things in the same way. And we have the same problem, is that he'll say, well, go do this. And I'll be like, but I don't understand what it is you're trying to get me to do. You're going to have to show me, because I'm a very hands-on learner. I like to put my hands on it and do it and be able to feel it, touch it, taste it, see it. I'm a very tactile learner. So unless I can actually, if you just explain something to me, it's going to go whoosh right over my head, and I'm really, truly not going to internalize that. But if you can put my hands on it, and I can actually touch it, feel it, do it, interact with it, then I'm going to learn it better, and I'm going to internalize it, and I'm going to remember it. I think I'm out of time here, and I need to let Karen get up here and get her stuff set up. So thank you very much. I appreciate you coming. If you are more interested in learning, you can contact me here. This is actually a copy of my business card. So my website is mswhitakerphd.com. I also have a booth downstairs. It's interactive. You can click around on it and see things, and I would love for you to do that. This is actually my website, the homepage of my website that has been cycling through here as I've been talking, and some of you have probably noticed that there's a website, that's the slideshow that's been playing over here. And I would be more than happy to, talk to you about differentiated instruction. I've also put my PowerPoint into the dock station in the back, and please feel free to download that. So really enjoyed it, and thank you very much for coming today.